welcome to the morning meeting. Let's dispense with all the niceties and put up a tweet, breaking news moments ago. One of the journalists who's able to call President Trump and on his cell phone, and sometimes he picks up, is Garrett Haake. So Garrett Haake doesn't abuse it because he knows if he keeps calling, eventually they'll cut him off. So apparently, I would guess this was not a scheduled interview. The president picked up, or maybe he called Garrett. That could have happened too. But in any event, put up the tweets, please. Garrett Haake did a brief phone interview with the president regarding the Atlantic story. And the president said, Michael Wallace has learned a lesson and he's a good man. He believes the story is essentially a non-issue and that Goldberg president on the chat had no impact at all. The attacks, he continued, were, quote, perfectly successful. Sean, we'll double back here on a bunch of this, but does the president's brief remarks to Garrett Haake end this story?
Well, I don't think so. You're going to have you're going to have Intel officials on the Hill today and tomorrow. So I assume that Democrats will have their public shot at them and try to make something of it. And also, there's two issues here. The president trying to shift attention back toward, back into his court. That doesn't mean it's done. It just means that he's publicly trying to put a pin in it.
Dan, what do you think of the implications of what the president said?
Just keeps the story going. As Sean said, he's trying to focus on the success of the attack and not on the kind of broader set of issues that I'm sure we're going to jump into, and for which he partly rose to fame, which is hammering Hillary Clinton for using unsecured email systems outside the proper channels. And again, we'll talk about all the reasons that that's an issue. So the symmetry here is too beautiful for Democrats.
Does not surprise me the president's sticking with Waltz, because if you pull that thread out, then you have to ask the question, everyone on that exchange, everyone on that chain knew it was improper and exercised reckless and poor judgment. So you want to get rid of the chief of staff, the secretary of defense, the secretary of state, the CIA director, the head of national intelligence. They all exercised pretty bad judgment. Maybe Waltz's was worse since it was his chain. But in any event, let me run through the schedule very quickly. We'll have this conversation with peace, love, and understanding and the presumption of grace for all. Thank you for joining the morning meeting. Dan, Sean, and I will walk you through it all. And again, if you want to be in the conversation, as some of you already have your hands up, please raise your hand. And we'll get to lots of things today, including this story, but also some things involving the Democrats. President today, having lunch with the vice president at 1:30 and then signing executive orders at 2, currently closed press. We'll see if that stands. Don't know what the vice president's doing except having lunch with the president. Caroline Levitt tweet. Thank you for sending that to me. Jeffrey Goldberg is well known for a sensationalist spin. Here are the facts. No war plans were discussed. War plans in quotes. Sean will walk through what that means. No classified material was sent to the thread. The White House counsel's office is providing guidance on a number of different platforms. Let's see. Look at Goldberg's number. All right. So she basically says no national security problem here. In any event, on the Hill today, lots going on. At 10 o'clock, right as we go off the air, Tulsi Gabbard and John Radcliffe both testify. Can't imagine that they're going to differ from the president in saying mistakes were made, time to move on. House Republicans and Democrats hold their separate meetings this morning at this hour. House Republicans press conference at 10 o'clock. House Democrats press conference around 11. I put in the day book in my Substack that the party lunches are today. They're not. But Chuck Schumer is meeting with the Senate Democrats today for the first time since the brouhaha. And so we'll see what happens there. All right. Let's just start out, Sean, this way. Why would the White House has confirmed that a bunch of very senior officials, pretty much the most senior people in national security in the government, except for the president, engaged in this conversation on Signal. Why would they use Signal? Why wouldn't they use the approved government platforms for this kind of conversation?
So there's two main ways that you can communicate in a classified setting when you're doing this. One is to literally go into what they call a SCIF, a sensitive compartmentalized information facility, which the White House Situation Room, it's a room, there's mobile ones, they set them up. It means that you can't get eavesdropped on. The second is, depending on the level of classification, you can get a secure phone put into your office. I had one in my house that they'll come, they put in. If you need to receive information, they can call you. It allows you to have those conversations going up to a certain level of classification, so that the line is clear, but obviously you can still be eavesdropped on. The bottom line is that it's cumbersome, right? Going down to a SCIF, obviously, the SecDef's office, I think, is SCIFed. He's got a conference room that's SCIFed. The White House has the sit room and several others. The NSC over in the old executive office building has a series of SCIFs. But it's, I'm not explaining, I'm explaining, I'm not justifying, which is that, in the moment you say, hey, let's just get on a group text. In itself, initially, when you read that exchange from Goldberg that he put in there, they're just saying, hey, appoint deputies. We're going to have, so the way that the principals committee works is that there's deputies that meet first. They socialize things. It moves up to the principals committee. And so he just says assign deputies. Okay, that's still a government function. It shouldn't occur on a signal on a commercial app, but it's just, hey, give me your name, right? And so that, so-and-so for treasury, so-and-so. Okay, none of that's classified. That's just who your rep is. We're going to have a meeting. Tell me who you want us to contact. It's still an issue of, there's a Records Act issue that you shouldn't be doing that on a commercial app. But that's whatever. Where this thing goes askew, again, is starting to have discussions about deliberations policy, anything. And that's where I think that's the broader issue. I mean, so I don't know if this is what you're asking. I can kind of go in. I mean, to me,
well, let me ask you this. That was great. So it seems to me that the government does not have a secure way for 12 busy people dropping their kids off at, at a dance or going to the supermarket. They don't have a way to have that conversation on the fly, right?
No. But I don't know that, I mean, anyone does. You can't, I mean, you could, I guess you could outfit, like the Beast is probably SCIF, the president's car.
Right. But they're going through their daily lives. One person was in Moscow, apparently.
Right, embassies have SCIFs. So
but you don't have to. But you don't. But in a world where people are expecting instant communication, I'm not justifying it. I'm just trying to explain why I think they did it.
Oh no, it's clear.
It's like, all right, the 12 of us want to have real time back and forth communication. We're not going to all move into the SCIF for the next 48 hours. We're going to go about our lives, go to meetings, do other stuff. We want to do it on our phones now. As I understand it, most government phones can't have signal. So just on the most basic.
I mean, just to back up, when I was in the White House, you couldn't text.
Right.
Now,
so the Chinese probably, and maybe others, are watching those personal phones, right? They probably have all of them. So how could the White House chief of staff, the head of national intelligence, the head of the CIA participate in a group chain, regardless of the level of classification of the material, regardless of whether there were quote unquote war plans? How could they all do that? How could someone, not Sean and then Dan, how could someone on that chain not say, this is just not an appropriate place for this?
Well, there's two things. One is, you're right. I mean, somebody at some level, right? When you do this kind of stuff, someone should flag and say, hey guys, we need to take, I mean, you see in the chain at one point, if you read the Goldberg story, Walt says, on the high side. So in parlance, there's what they call the SIPRNet and the NIPRNet. The SIPRNet is the high side. NIPRNet is the low side. And so he references at one point and he says, hey, on your high side, you'll see the following, right? Which is just normal. Like that happens all the time. You get a text or an email that says, go check your high side. Okay. That's not anything. I mean, that's just how business is done, so that, because it's a little bit sometimes more cumbersome. It takes what they call a SIPR token. You have to go put it in. Again, nothing huge, but it just is a reminder. You get that all the time. Hey, go check your high side. I left you a message you need to see. Okay, fair enough. He says that in the chain. I think that there's two issues at hand. One is, when it starts off, as I said, it's just, hey, give me some names. Okay, here's your name. I get that. When it evolves, that's when somebody should have raised their hand and said, hey guys, we need to take this to SIPR. We need to go here. That's where, and I get getting caught up in the moment, right? You get a text from the national security advisor or whatever, and you kind of go, oh, well, if it's coming from somebody that you trust, you assume, oh, okay, well, they've got to, I would, go, okay, this is weird, but since they're sending it to me, I assume that that's legit. That being said, in this day and age, I would, if that were me, I think I would have probably gone on the high side and said, hey, are you sending me a signal message? Because this seems weird. Like that we're like, so I think that you're right. There's a point at which if it was just a name, somebody sent me a signal, hey, can you send me a phone number where I can reach you? Or who do you want to be your rep in this meeting? Okay, fine, whatever. When that conversation evolved is when I think somebody should have said, hey guys, we need to take this whole thing high side.
Yep. Dan.
Well, look, I'll say one thing here about where they were, which is supposedly Steve Witkoff was in the Kremlin negotiating and on signal. So you want to talk about foreign governments who, we try to hack their phones. The Chinese, it's very clear. If you go to China, they tell you to not bring your government phone or only use your government phone because they penetrate your personal phone the moment it enters Chinese communication signals. They embed spying technology. So one, just where they were, it's horrifying. Two, it could be that it was inconvenient to go to the SCIF and be on government servers. The other thing is, and I think my former boss, this was her thinking, is if you are on government systems, it is recorded for history. The archives captures everything. And increasingly, there is an attitude to go outside of the government net that catches and archives for history or congressional investigators or anyone else that may come looking at your information to go to something else. Don't know if that's what they were doing, but I have a suspicion it might have been part of the calculus, which raises the question mark, which I think, Trump didn't get to. Are other conversations within the administration happening off of government servers and on things like Signal?
Correct.
I think we will. And by the way, those folks didn't act like it was the first time they'd been on Signal together in the tone of everything. I will say this to those of you in the chat who are saying, move on, this is not a big deal. Just look in the mirror. I say this with a smile on my face. Ask yourself just one question. If this were done by the Biden administration, if this were Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and all the people in the Biden administration, Kamala Harris, if they were having this conversation on Signal, just look yourself in the mirror and say, I'd have the same attitude. No big deal. Just ask yourself that one question, because I can tell you what your attitude would likely be. If you're about America first, your attitude would be the same as any sane person and many congressional Republicans who are still being quiet would have, which is this was reckless and dangerous and arrogant. May not end the republic. We're lucky, maybe we're lucky that there was no adverse effect. But just look yourself in the mirror and say, this were Kamala Harris and Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, would you have the same attitude? No big deal. Just ask yourself that question. And if your answer is yes, please raise your hand, because I'd like to talk to you, because I know that's not your answer. I know your answer is if this were Kamala Harris and Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, you would call for them all to resign. You would call for a full investigation, and you would say it was the greatest mass failure of arrogance and recklessness using technology in a national security operation you'd ever seen. That's what you'd say. So thank you for that. Sean, Mark, can I just make one last point though? Because I wanted to get, and by the way, for all the people in here who like to chant lock her up, like to Mark's point, right, exactly. Why do the big thing here, and Mark mentioned this earlier, is there's a reason Signal is not allowed on government phones, right? It is not the most secure means of communication. So that's one. Two, if it is not allowed on government phones, unless we find out that somebody in the counsel's office made an exemption and they were all able to download it, it means they were all on their personal phones, which are incredibly, you can penetrate the personal phones. And we as a government try to spy on the personal phones of the Europeans, the Russians, the Chinese, and everyone.
With great success.
With great success. So we know how unsecure those devices are. So the reason you're not allowed to do this is because our enemies literally are trying to penetrate government phones all day, every day, as John Podesta and everyone else, famously found out when the Russians got in. And that is why it is a national security issue.
Yep. All right. I want to talk about the Jeffrey Goldberg angle, because one of the crazy parts of this story is that he's arguably the most prominent hostile reporter to Trump in America. I mean, if you look at his track record, he is even if you don't believe, as many smart people do, that he's made stories up to hurt Donald Trump, even if you don't believe that, as many smart people do, his hostility is manifest. How he could be in colloquy with the national security advisor of this president is a phenomenal thing. Although then you remember the president himself's in regular colloquy with Maggie Haberman. In any event, here is Pete Hegseth from last night.
I don't equate the two. And
Okay. Okay. All right. We'll get to
the guy
that.
who hates the media.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't put those guys even in the same.
Okay. So here's Hegseth last night. You've probably seen snippets of his clip, but this is the full thing. And then here is Jeffrey Goldberg back to back on Morning Joe, challenging Hegseth's claim that there was no operational details, so-called war plans, on the chat. Roll, please.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops. I've monitored it very closely from the beginning. And you see, we've been managing 4 years of deferred maintenance under the Trump administration. Our troops, our sailors were getting shot at as targets. Our ships couldn't sail through. And when they did shoot back, it was purely defensively or at shacks in Yemen. President Trump said, no more. We will reestablish deterrence. We will open freedom of navigation, and we will ultimately decimate the Houthis, which is exactly what we're doing as we speak from the beginning, overwhelmingly. I've heard I was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, there's more than one text in that exchange. The CIA director came in with operational information. The National Security Advisor came in with after battle assessments, or actually during battle assessments of the damage done, including the damage done to human targets and how those people were targeted. Again, I don't want to go into details because I don't think it's responsible to put out operational issues, and I don't understand all the sources and methods issues that are raised by this from an intelligence perspective. But no, I mean, I saw Hegseth's response yesterday. It was just unserious. Obviously, this would, by the standard vernacular understanding of what war plan means, it was at 1:45, this is going to happen. At 1:52, this is going to happen. Then this happens. Then that happens. And then we do this. And then we do that. He's telling this group. He's letting them know probably more than they need to know. I mean, the Secretary of State, the Chief of Staff of the White House don't actually need to know which weapons packages are being deployed in what way. Obviously, right before an attack. If you're doing an after-action report, if you're sitting in the cabinet and you say, hey, Pete, how'd you pull that off? Maybe that's part of a conversation, but obviously, you know, at a certain level, you don't need to know the technical aspects. But no, there was it was what it was, and why it was so dangerous to kind of release into the wild of a commercial messaging app was these are the things that are going to happen in the immediate future, and some of these things involve obviously, you know, American pilots.
Quick sidebar. Amazing how influential, we say it all the time, Stephen Miller is. The fact that the domestic policy advisor was on the chain. Dan, will demonizing Jeff Goldberg.
He's not. He's the deputy chief of staff. The domestic policy advisor is Vince Haley.
But he's deputy chief of staff for domestic policy, isn't he?
I think his portfolio is wider, but needless to say,
it is wider, but I don't know. Well, let me put it this way. He's not known to be typically thought of as a major player in our national security policy, but he is. Dan, will demonizing Jeffrey Goldberg work for the Republicans?
It will work in the sense that it's apple pie to MAGA. I mean, just try to go after him, try to paint him as part of the resistance and Trump derangement syndrome and all of this. Look, I am super sympathetic and empathetic to Mike Walls in that he obviously accidentally added him. Like it was not, hey, let's, at least to my knowledge, like, let's bring him in and kind of show him how the inner things work, right? I think Mike Walls, it's being reported, is mortified, and I'm sure he is, right? That is like an entirely kind of small issue here of the fact that, like, who got it? It's not really even an issue. So I think all the things we just discussed are the much bigger issue. But will independents say, oh, it's Jeffrey Goldberg? So no. But will MAGA get fired up? Sure.
John.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of issues here, right? The political is one thing, and the response. I mean, responsible and Jeffrey Goldberg in the same sentence are never two things that should be uttered. He is a horrible, horrible person. I had the unfortunate experience of having to deal with him. He is not a person that I would ever want to deal with in the future again.
Sean, let me just ask you to be specific, because probably a lot of people on here don't know his history with you and others. Why do you say he's a horrible person?
I think in the most basic sense, when there's a mistake made, one of my first encounters was when a Atlantic reporter made some unbelievably disparaging remark about Ivanka Trump during the transition. And I called him for the first time. I'd never met him. And I said, hey, I think we can both admit that this comment that Julia Offie had made, I didn't know her at the time, is despicable and unwarranted. And he said, yeah, I agree. And I said, okay, so can we just have you guys apologize? This isn't the way to start an administration. He goes, look, let's just let bygones be bygones. And I said, wait a second, you admit that it's a horrible, despicable thing, and yet your answer is, let's just move on. And that's the kind of guy he is. And that's the tip of the iceberg. I mean, Pete delineated some of his other great work out there, lying and disparaging the president on flimsy reporting at best.
So if you were White House press secretary in this administration, and you heard through the grapevine that the national security advisor was reaching out to Jeffrey Goldberg, how would you react to that?
Astonishment. I think I would look. There's the question you're asking is interesting, because this is what I thought of yesterday. Was he trying to get Jill Goldberg and in his contact list got the wrong? I mean, I did this morning. I went through and I'm like, could I have screwed up? Like, could you have mistakenly added somebody, George Goldberg to the text or something? Who's in my? I mean, honestly, I was like, how could this have happened?
I do that all the time. I mean,
huh?
I conflate names like that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I had someone the other day in this text chain where I didn't understand. They're like asking me something about the family, and they're like, I realized that they had gotten the wrong, used someone not my wife, but same first name. So it happens. But why is Jeffrey Goldberg in your contact list? Number two, at some point, So that to me is the first thing, and that's why I think the president is probably most upset, is that you created a footfall. You brought in somebody who is a known hater, obviously by mistake, but it does call into question why it's there. The other thing that so let me be clear on a couple things. Multiple things can be true at the same time. I'm not excusing any of the action that occurred, right? But for Jeffrey Goldberg, who has zero national security experience, nada, like the stuff that I just wiped my foot has more, for him to go on a program and talk about what the chief of staff needs to know or not is completely out of his knowledge base. He has zero experience in this field.
Well, but he can ask. He can ask people. He can do
no. But for him to go on television and say these plans are things that the chief of staff doesn't need to know, that's not how it works. He has no background in this field, none. So again, that doesn't mitigate what happened. It's amazing that he gets to decide what's appropriate and inappropriate to be shared.
He's not deciding; he's commenting. I mean,
and look, he has no credibility.
But I mean, I disagree. I mean, Steve Witkoff doesn't need to know that stuff either. Sitting there with Vladimir Putin, he's a real estate developer, right? I mean,
in charge of. I mean. Yeah.
No, he had no reason to know the operational battle plans. Right?
Sure, he does. If he's literally negotiating and something's happening,
it's up to the president, the national security advisor, who's on.
There were things that I got read into all the time, because hey, there's going to be a media effect or whatever. Just because the president's like, I think you would be good to get your feedback on this. The president decides who gets read in on what situations,
but
the principal. In the case of the principals committee, it's led by the national security advisor. They get to decide who's read in. So
Sean, I agree that they're right to decide, and I agree that Goldberg was wrong in this case. But I don't think it's right or fair or suspect to say because he's not an expert, he's not entitled to comment on it. He can do reporting.
He's not commenting. He's not questioning it. He's making a decision.
But he's getting it wrong based on ignorance and
lack of experience. Right. But for him, so the other thing that I would just say lastly is that, look, and I get why the media does this, because so few people have served or have experience with national security. But there are certain things that matter. And again, this doesn't make it right. I'm not excusing it. But when you use words like confidential, secret, top secret, those all matter. In the world of national security, in military planning, the level of classification is actually set by law, right? And there are certain things that meet certain criteria. It must be handled in a certain way, depending on their classification. Again, I'm not excusing, I'm explaining. And so when they run around and say classified military, this or that, unless they know the level of classification, that is misinformation. And so I just want to caution people when they talk about war plans, that there are actual war plans, O plans, that are classified at a certain level, that detail certain things. For people like Jeffrey Goldberg to use those terms to scare people without having the proper understanding of what they mean is irresponsible at best.
I hear you that there are different terms. You're absolutely right, and words matter.
They're not different terms, Dan. They actually
I know. There are different definitions. They are real, they matter, and they separate different stages of action. But the big picture here is still the big picture.
I agree. And that's why I said at the beginning, I'm not mitigating that. But what I'm saying is when you use terms that mean something,
I hear
it's
you.
like walking into a doctor when the doctor, I mean, like you can't, if you would go, well, I don't need surgery if I just needed a Band-Aid. Those kind of things matter in these discussions. And it's irresponsible for people. This could make the situation, frankly, worse to some degree. Right. So, I mean, the level of classification could make it worse or better depending on what level it was. I'm not trying to mitigate it. I'm just trying to say for these people who have no understanding of what this means, to throw around terms like that is irresponsible.
I agree. A couple things. I wanted to talk very, very much. I want to talk about the Democrat grassroots today, but we won't. I'm going to give you one piece of news, and then we're going to open it up to questions. Last night on Two Way Tonight, we heard from lots of Trump voters who were very, very upset about what happened. Just FYI. So we'll see what people are today. Tom Cotton, chair of the Intelligence Committee in the Senate. I was super curious to know what he would say about all this because he's pretty hawkish about security. And on Fox just now, he came down decisively with the administration, said a bunch of the senators who are going to make a big deal about this today probably are using Signal to speak to each other and speak to their aides. He says, I don't know if this is true, that the Biden administration authorized Signal as a means of communication that was consistent with presidential record-keeping requirements, which is one of the issues people have raised, and that Signal has been set up to be able to be used by this administration for senior administration's officials to communicate. So if that's true, and there was no classified information on here, then the sin really was only bringing Jeffrey Goldberg on.
Correct.
Right. So that's a possibility. We'll see. But having Cotton support is huge because had Cotton been
and Tom Cotton's also not one of these guys that's going to throw credibility away on an issue like this. So
correct.
I take when he says something like this, I think it really matters. One other political point that I think is important to understand. I think part of the reason, like yesterday, we talked early about, the Jeff Landry, the Louisiana governor, being there, and subsequently learned that was the big Hyundai investment announcement. The president had another cabinet meeting yesterday where they talked about some of their achievements. I think part of the president's frustration isn't just Jeffrey Goldberg writing this. It's taking what was going to be a really good day of announcements and positive information for this administration. And sort of, it's like, that really great play in a game that gets called back where you just negated it. And I think he's probably a little pissed off, rightfully so, that he had a really good day advancing his agenda that got negated.
Totally agree. 100%. All right. Farrell, welcome in.
By the way, can we just, whatever Doug Carey, like if he's rowing, I think we got to get that in. That's a first.
All right. We'll come back to Doug. Farrell, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what your thoughts are on this story.
Currently in Indiana, northern Indiana, very small town.
Were you born in a small town?
I'm from Central Illinois. First time voter this year. I'm 40 years old. I just moved up here from Florida about a month ago. But I've heard you on Tucker Carlson's show, learned about Two-Way on Megyn Kelly, and love the show. I've been watching it for 3 or 4 months now.
Thank you for being here, sir.
Great perspective on everything. I was watching last night as soon as I got home from work. Sorry, I probably look like crap this morning. I worked a long shift yesterday. You looked. As soon as I saw the story break yesterday, I knew. I said Dan's gonna be furious over this. I already knew it. I was like, I called. I texted my mother-in-law. I was like, Dan Halperin's just gonna eat this alive, and it understandably so. You seem like you obviously care about our national security, and I think rightfully so. You were very upset, and so that's one thing I thought about. But I have tinfoil hat here. Hopefully not. This isn't too far of a question, but do we think something like this would get buried under a Biden administration if something like this happened, or do we think it comes out?
I think I'll say this as a reporter, because I've had lots of talks with people about this. I think that there's many reporters who would have done it differently than Jeffrey Goldberg. Now, he claims he didn't acknowledge he was on the chain right away because he thought the chain might not be real. But there are many reporters, I'm one of them, who if I were on that chain, I would tell them right away. I'd get off it and I'd tell them. That's what many reporters would do. He chose to go a different direction, he claims. So I could imagine if something like this happened in the Biden administration where they added someone to a chain, because most reporters prefer the Biden administration to the Trump administration, they would have just gotten off of it and told them and not done anything. Not 100%, but there's certainly a higher probability.
Would you have gotten off it right away? Like, would you, when you saw it, would you have said, hey, I'm not on this, or would you have waited for the first round?
Well, I would have waited to see what the topic was. It was possible they were adding me to, like, offer me an exclusive interview with the entire national security team or something. But as soon as I figured out I was on it inadvertently, I would have gotten right off and I would have told them. Yeah, I've done that. It's happened to me. The exact thing is not at this level, but the exact thing has happened to me where I've been inadvertently included on things. Now, just to be honest, I was included on a listserv from the Trump campaign inadvertently, but it wasn't sensitive information. It was just clips. I didn't say anything. I stayed on that for a while. But there was just clips. It was just clips. It was just convenience. But if it was a private chain of proprietary information, I'd get right off of it. Yes, Daryl.
I'll say this. I was, as soon as I saw the story yesterday too, first I thought of you, but second of all, I thought I was so disappointed, because I think a lot of MAGA, which I'm not sure I'm part of, but voted for Trump. I think a lot of people were disappointed that this happened.
Can I ask you?
Say why.
Let me ask you this: if the reporting that Tom Cotton just had, which is that the Signal app that they were using was authorized, what would that change your opinion?
Yes, absolutely. And it's just unfortunate that the person was added. But it just seems like a first black eye, and this seems like a big one. But it just felt like that. If you're being honest, you're flying at 30,000 feet and kind of stepping back and looking at it. It seemed like the first big misstep on administration for people we all love and we voted for and wanted the administration, people we wanted to see in there. It just felt bad.
Oh, yeah. Listen, I agree.
Sean.
I think Mike Waltz is eminently qualified for this position. He is a great person, very, very smart. If you ever, his book about his, serving as a special forces Green Beret is really insightful as far as how to conduct diplomacy. So I think on a personal level, I just felt for the guy. I know Dan said some similar things on Twitter, but it's when you screw up as publicly, and I'm well aware of what that's like. It just sucks, and you feel like this big, and no one outside of your wife who is legally bound to love you. There's not a lot of people out there, lending you a helping hand.
Yeah, I think the other, the political challenge for Trump is, there's already a little bit of nick with Doge and Musk being a little reckless. Even some Trump supporters, while they like what Doge is doing in terms of eliminating waste and fraud, they do kind of look at the kind of helter-skelter nature of it and cringe a little and say it's a little reckless and Musk is a little kind of out of control. This kind of adds to that, right? It's just, as you say, it's a little reckless. It's a little disappointing. And I think at some point when you sustain a few of these, a narrative begins to maybe set in that is hard to change.
Farrell, thank you for joining. Grateful to you. Thanks for being part of Two Way. Tiffany, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind, please.
Nope.
Tiffany, freeze.
Yes, not us.
All right. We'll wait for Tiffany to come back. Anthony, welcome
I'll
in.
win.
Oh,
there you
wait,
go.
here we go.
There you go. Here you go, Tiffany. Go ahead.
Oh, you can hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Hi,
Let's start
my
from
name's
start.
Tiffany.
Yep. Where are you,
First
Tiffany?
first time caller, long time listener. It's my
Great.
kids getting ready for school, so I'm sorry
Nice.
if they interrupt us right now. But I am a conservative. I've voted for Trump 2 of 3 times, not the first time, and I have also volunteered in local politics, and I have been a press secretary for a senatorial campaign where I was the person who put the press reporter on the chain. So I feel a lot of sympathy for Mike Waltz right now.
Yep.
And I guess that kind of gives me an interesting perspective. I am upset by the arrogance of how Pete Hegseth handled it yesterday. It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I'm willing to be very forgiving and understanding and get to the bottom of it, but I feel like they need to take it seriously, and I feel like they need to have a little bit of humility in this hard moment, that they're making us all look bad. You know, I want to love this team. They're not people I always ideologically agreed with. I'm probably more interventionalist than the JD Vances and the Tulsi Gabbards of the world, but I'm willing to give them some room to see what they're doing. But yeah, the arrogance is what kind of is hitting me wrong.
It's a great
And Tiffany,
point.
Tiffany really well said. What be specific though? What did they do that was arrogant? Or is it just Hegseth's reaction?
It's really Hegseth. I mean, I agree that I think Trump probably knew before he made his statements to the press a few hours later, but that's fine. I think, there's a way to handle this on the press side that you might need to have a few hours to figure it out. But yeah, it was Pete Hegseth. He was like outside and he was like, war plans were not, he was just very defensive and kind of angry. And the other thing I worry about that I wanted your thoughts on is I know the internal politics this is going to cause, the anger that people had with me when I accidentally put a journalist in. I just have a lot of feelings for Mike Waltz. I feel bad for him right now. It's going to be a painful few weeks for their unity as well.
Dan.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder if Walz ends up leaving like when there's good news for Trump and everyone goes and focuses on that. If there's a quiet, 8 p.m. on Friday night, he's resigned and going to see his family, something of that nature, because it is hard. I made a massive mistake when I worked for Jared Polis. And I'm not sure I ever really recovered in his eyes from the blunder. And it's just so hard to recover sometimes.
Yeah, I would just say there's a couple of things, Tiffany. I mean, first of all, thank you for expressing, I think, what a lot of people, which is, sometimes you screw up and no one sees it, and sometimes you do it rather epically on a public stage. And Dan's right. I mean, it's hard with Trump. The hardest part sometimes is, you might get forgiven by your colleagues, but in his eyes, where does that fit? And there are different mistakes in Trump world. I hope and I believe that people see how qualified and what a great person Mike Waltz is, and recognize it as a mistake and can move on. And because I hope that he really is a great pick to serve that. And so I think the question for me comes down to, I mean, hat tip to the behind the scenes team that, Caroline tweeted as well, echoing the Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, tweeted sentiments similar to what Tom Cotton expressed. So if this app is approved, and if that, then the sin is only the inclusion of Jeffrey Goldberg, which is still a problem. It's a much different story. And then it's, okay, we were allowed to use this and we were doing things at a certain level. Okay, but my mistake was including him. Then I get that personal thing. I think enough people hopefully have done something to to say, hopefully, like, I mean, like, this is a very different White House than when I was there. People would use opportunities like this to knife you, and to leak about you and to whatever. And I think this time enough people appreciate Mike Waltz that that's not happening, and you're not seeing that in the thing. The one thing I would say in Hegseth's defense is when Pete got off the plane, if you knew what he knew, meaning you were, hey, we had a conversation, we were authorized to be doing this, nothing rose to that level because, you know, my counsel said so or whatever, and we were like, and you get off and read that story, I think you would be pretty pissed too, right? And so you get off a plane, and I understand his attitude, which is, who the hell is this guy to say this and that, you know, for what I did. I get it. I understand your point. You get off a plane, people are asking you to respond to something. And if you didn't think you did anything wrong, you're going to be, you know, express, I think, the same kind of way that Pete did.
Sean, let me ask you this question. If Signal is in fact approved for national security conversations, and again, we all didn't think that an hour ago, why didn't the national security spokesperson say that yesterday when he put out his statement?
Because again, what was he asked? And we don't know. So his statement was, this seems authentic. He didn't say it wasn't inappropriate. If that was the case, I mean, like, that's what I thought was interesting about the statement, is that the initial thing was, yeah, this seems authentic. He wasn't denying the use of it or saying, I mean, like, he wasn't defensive. So
but things would have been in a much different place if they had made this clear yesterday.
No, I think
that's what it's so surprising.
Right,
none
so
of the 12 people on there would have come out or had staff say it.
Right. So that's, again, this is where we only see one side of the equation. I think what you're getting to, Mark, is why wasn't it cleaned up quicker? Which is,
that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Yeah. And because if you get asked a question,
sorry, just to clarify, I think you know this now, but I'm not asking you to challenge you. I'm asking you to provide your expertise.
No. Right, I know that. And what I'm saying is, so if the national security spokesman, Brian Hughes in this case, was asked, hey, is this a legitimate conversation? Is this authentic? I'm Jeffrey Goldberg. I want to make sure that this isn't a hoax. Is this legit? And the response is, it appears authentic. That's a very different question than, is Signal authorized, right?
Well, but Jeffrey Goldberg raised that question in his story, and it was all over social media and cable news yesterday.
Correct. No. Right. But there's two different, but if you weren't asked that initially, then yes, the question is, why didn't you go clean it up? Which is what you should have done if that was authorized, to say, I mean, and I think the thing that's interesting to me is the NSC spokesman on a situation like this, frankly, almost every situation, doesn't go out and say things at this level without going through the White House press office and saying, I'm being asked the following, are we good to do this? And in a case like this, I'd be hard pressed to think it didn't get bounced off, you know, some serious people to say.
Can I ask, though, did Cotton's statement say it was approved for national security purposes, or just say it was approved? See, I agree.
Yeah, I'm reading
a redirect.
I agree. Yeah. I'm reading a summary of what he said on Fox. Tiffany, thank you for joining.
For myself.
Tiffany, how old are your kids?
I have 5 kids spread out. So my youngest is 5. My oldest is 19. All boys, 5 boys.
Nice.
Are they all home?
Well, my 19-year-old is in Mexico serving LDS mission in Ciudad Juarez right now.
Amazing.
But the rest of them are home.
Thank you for coming on. Hope you can come back regularly.
Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate it. All right. Anthony, welcome, and tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Hey, it's such a pleasure to be here. Mark, I really love the show. I wanted to say, Dan, I really didn't like you at first, but then I realized it was that I didn't want to like you. I think you're really good at making the case for the Democrats. I'm full MAGA, by the way. And yeah, I just really love you guys. Think it's a great program.
We're grateful to you for that. Thank you.
I had a few questions about this story. Although I want to start with an anecdote. Like in my Twitter, X, online, social media, filter bubble, whatever you want to call it, I didn't hear the point about using Signal until I watched yesterday's morning meeting episode earlier this morning, because I had an exam late Sunday. So yeah, this is an anecdote. I didn't really hear that. I guess the question is Signal approved for national security discussion? Was that settled on the program this morning?
It hasn't been settled.
No, it has not been settled.
Okay.
We know that Tom Cotton and the press secretary are saying it's approved to be used by government officials, but we don't know if that extends to use the kind of national security use this was for.
Okay. Well, what I wanted to say is I'm a programmer. I'm not a cybersecurity expert by any means, but there is sort of a question of like, there's this whole like can of worms about, which apps are really controlled by who, and people sort of use them to sell information. So like, I'm going to go kind of tinfoil hat here for a sec, but maybe the government phones are spied on by the NSA. They want to keep tabs on elected officials, or maybe Signal is spied on spied on by whoever owns Signal. So somebody might be conscious of sort of which app to trust, and they might have just kind of manipulated, or maybe not manipulated is the wrong word, but sort of influence people to use one or the other. The reality is that no app is perfectly secure. It's impossible to make a computer perfectly secure, whether it's a government phone or not. So anyways, my point is, I don't really care that they're using Signal, even if it's not approved. There may or may not be a really good reason for it. As a MAGA person, I was more irritated by the fact that Jeffrey Goldberg was involved. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say.
Anthony, did you feel that way with Hillary Clinton's emails?
Okay, no. First of all, no, I didn't. I did not feel that way, but I was, kind of irritated. But the reason I think it's not equivalent, and you could say I'm weaseling it out of it or whatever, but I think it's different because Hillary Clinton deleted evidence.
Well, we don't know. So the Signal app, it sounds like some of the threads were designed to delete within 24 hours. And what we don't know is to what extent the Trump administration is using Signal, like with, are they using it for months, and are they retaining?
Well, if it's approved,
if it's approved, there would be a capture system.
There must be a capture system if it's approved.
Yeah. So that's actually not. So the way that it works is that if you use a non-government email or text, in theory, what you are supposed to do is then like screenshot it and forward it so that it's captured. So the way that the Presidential Records Act reads is that you need the burden is on you. So, you would screenshot your communication, forward it to your official email, and then it gets captured. There's a protocol though for how that works, because there's an understanding that some people just will email you on maybe the platform that they've known you to get on for years. You're supposed to hopefully bring it back to the other platform. Hey, thanks for that. Email me at my government thing. I will say this: Signal, among all of the apps, I believe it's born out of the Israelis, but I could be wrong on that. It is considered the most secure, like in the whether it's WhatsApp or whatever. So again, and then whether or not what level and all that kind of stuff is stuff that the counsel's office would promulgate to people and say, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do, and then here's how you need to proceed. So that's whether or not they share that or not, but that's kind of, again, something that's germane to this whole discussion.
Anthony,
and in Hillary Clinton's case, she deleted what she claimed were not relevant emails. Now, you could trust her or not.
Can I make one other, and again, this is just so people understand the system. One of the issues that Hillary had was, so classified information has markings: confidential, secret, top secret, SCI, compartment, whatever. And it's marked, or it should be. When you take that from the quote high side and bring it to the low side, that is where the problems occur. So I take a piece of information that is on the secure network and I bring it down to the unsecure network. That's where she got in trouble. She took classified information, put it on an unclassified information, and then sent it out. The difference so far between this situation and that is we don't know whether the level of classification that was sent around any of this. Having discussions doesn't make it classified. So what was sent matters, and that's and sort of the ref is still out on what was sent around, and that is a distinction that's important.
100% agree. Mike, welcome in. Unmute Mike Klatt. Unmute if you would. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind.
Hey, Mark, great show. Love the dialogue.
Thank you, sir.
I will say if the Chinese, Russians, Iranians, and North Koreans didn't pay attention to signal before, they're all over it now.
They were
Yep.
paying attention to it before. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
One aspect of this I haven't heard discussed is, and one that dismays me, is once again the dovishness of J.D. Vance that's been revealed in this message stream. I mean, to me, the guy exhibits some of the most dovish, non-interventionist instincts that I despised in the Biden administration. And I just wish that Trump supporters would hold the Trump administration to the same standard that I held the Biden administration to. And I'm sympathetic with many of the Trump administration goals, but I just don't see a consistent standard being applied.
Yeah, Mike, it's a great point. Under other circumstances, if that were revealed, it'd be a huge story. And not just because he disagreed with the president and the policy, but because of the nature of the disagreement. Dan, thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, the Houthis shot rockets at one of our aircraft carriers this morning with a barrage of missiles. So the idea that we like maximum power and wiped them out, we haven't. It's still a problem. It's still going to be there. So we'll see what happens. But I thought J.D. Vance, his argument appeared to be the public has not been conditioned yet for this, that people don't know who the Houthis are. People are going to wonder why we're doing this. Look at Europe, and are we bailing them out again after he just gave the speech that Europe needs to clean up its own actions? So I actually found that whole dialogue incredibly fascinating. And it does show debate. For those who think it's a bunch of hotheads firing off, there was clearly pushback and debate, which is what you would want. I mean, to be sympathetic to them. I thought that was immensely fascinating.
Yeah, Sean.
It's interesting that I thought about that, and I guess I've kind of gone back and forth on that. Is he asking for, hey, we need to see clarity on this? We're about to take an action, and I don't know that I heard the president say this. Or is he saying, hey, we need to condition the ground for this, right? Do we need to go out and explain to people what we're doing? Which I actually think is responsible. Before you escalate things, do we need to communicate to the American people and say, we're doing this because of this? So it's interesting. I sort of appreciate your take on this. I don't know that I had the same read on it initially, though.
And Mark, can I and I'll get off.
Yes, sir. No, go ahead.
Can I make one more plug for what
Yes,
you
sir.
all are trying to do and have cross dialogue between people with different viewpoints? For the last year and a half, my church, we've convened a small group that we've called Faith and Firearms. And it took a contentious issue, which is gun rights, gun control. And we brought people together from the congregation with liberal and conservative viewpoints, discussed, debated it in a friendly atmosphere. And then after 18 months, we presented to our congregation kind of a panel discussion of how we were able to cross that ideological divide. And it's been fantastic. And I hope we can replicate that on other issues. And I hope other people can do something similar.
Hey, Mike, can I ask you a question?
That's awesome, Mike. That's so cool.
Do you feel that was the outcome more just an understanding of the other side, or did people switch? Was there an attempt by one side or the other to bring people to it?
I think certainly people tried to persuade people from different viewpoints, but it was more just explaining, and I think particularly from the conservative side, that we're not crazies. We have rational reasons and can support the arguments we make. And I think that opened the eyes of some of the liberals. I don't think I personally persuaded any of them, but I think we were able to have people understand that everybody has rational reasons and, more importantly, good faith reasons for what they believe. And we made a lot of cross-ideological friendships. I mean, some of the most liberal people in this group are now really good friends of mine, and I never spoke to them before. And it's been an amazing process. And I wanted to tout it on two-way because I think two-way is seeking to do the same thing.
Mike, we'd love if you'd bring a bunch of your congregation on two-way at some point and have a full conversation about it.
Hey, I'm one of your best advocates in the last 6 weeks since I discovered two-way.
All right. Well,
That's
thank
awesome.
you. Well, let us know how to reach you, and let's get a bunch of you on and talk it through how you did it, and maybe set a kind of a more vivid example for folks.
That'd be great. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir. All right. So Caroline Levitt just tweeted again that the president has full confidence in
Mike Waltz.
Mike Waltz, and that's quote, stories claiming otherwise are driven by anonymous sources who clearly do not speak for the to the president, and written by reporters who are thirsty for a scoop. Who isn't thirsty for a scoop? But I take her point. Here's the tweet right there. Caroline Levitt, profiled in the Washington Post, currently on the website. So Sean, just like your sort of overall concluding remarks here, given where we started, we now have the presidential interview, we have the Caroline Levitt tweets, we have the Tom Cotton interview on Fox. Is it possible that this thing is done as a political issue by the end of the day, or you still don't think so? Because you said at the top, so it surprised me a little bit, because I think it may be done. But we've learned more facts.
The reason, so when you look at, when you study crises, they've got 48 hours of oxygen. And if that oxygen goes out of the room, generally the story dies. If new oxygen enters the room, the crisis then evolves, or it can find a new room to burn in. And I think when you look at the opportunity that exists today, where Democrats have a crack at the DNI and the CIA director today in about 6 minutes, if there is a foot fault there, right, that gives new oxygen. I think if Radcliffe and Tulsi go into this thing and come out unscathed, which they're both politically very adept at doing, then the oxygen starts to go away. But they've got 2 shots today and tomorrow on the Hill. And that's where I think that the potential for more oxygen coming is. And so the president's done his best to put it out. Caroline's done her best to put it out. You've got the congressional folks. But Democrats, this is their opportunity now to keep the fire burning. So that's why I think it might be dead. But this is where, one mistake keeps it alive, where they say no big deal or something like that.
Dan.
Yeah, I think the big thing to watch for is, was it approved for national security? If Signal is an approved app for national security purposes and archived, then I think this does kind of die out. But if it was not, then I think it's going to open the question of, what happened. And are there more conversations that have been, had on this unapproved app? And it will have life then, because people are going to want answers.
Yeah. Very grateful to both of you for being so level-headed and smart about this. And to everybody who called in today, we'd like to say again, in two-way conversations like no other. And I know of no other conversation like this on this story that's occurred in the last day. So grateful to all of you for participating. 2 more two-ways today, 4:00 Eastern time. My colleague, Michael Moynihan. Again, if you're not familiar with Michael's work, I recommend you tune in. Michael Moynihan, 4 p.m. Eastern time today. His guest, Laura Delana. Incredible story. You can Google and read all about it. But watch at 4 p.m. Eastern time, and you won't be disappointed in the quality of that conversation. And then tonight, regular time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, I'll be here for two-way tonight. And reminder, this Thursday, a private two-way for members of the community with David Bonson, sponsor of Two-Way Tonight. You can also read his Dividend Cafe newsletter. But this Thursday, March 27th, 10 a.m. Eastern time, so much uncertainty of the economy. Are we headed towards recession, stagflation? What impact might the tariffs have? Full, long conversation with David, and your questions at the center of it. If you want to be part of it, go to tway.tv/TBG, the Bonson Group, tway.tv/TBDG to sign up to be part of that conversation Thursday morning, immediately after this program. Gentlemen, look forward to seeing you in 23 hours to see if this is what we're talking about. And I do want to talk about the Democrats and the grassroots. I've gotten so many encouraging emails from Democrats saying, maybe it's the grassroots. We don't need, people talk about a leadership vacuum. By running candidates for Congress and by the grassroots energizing, maybe we can change the party's trajectory. Fascinating, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow. I'll probably talk about it tonight too. Gentlemen, see you in 23 hours. Have a great
real
day.
quick,
Yes,
before we,
I'm sorry, Sean, I forgot to ask you.
No,
Sean,
it's not about me. Actually, it's
but
about,
I want to know what you have tonight too.
Well,
I apologize.
Tonight, I've got the fellows from the Ruthless podcast on, but today is not about me. Today is
by the way.
Today is National Medal of Honor Day. Today, we honor all of the folks who have earned the nation's highest military award. And I just hope in a day when people can name every Kardashian and Jenner, that we might take 2 seconds and remember people who actually sacrificed and exhibited bravery on behalf of this nation. So take
Amen.
a moment, Google some of these amazing individuals and the sacrifice they made. So it's something that we should prioritize in this country. The museum down in Arlington, there are 2. to pay tribute to the one in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, but there is another one opening today in Arlington, Texas, where it's pretty amazing. I had a chance to tour it pre-construction or pre-opening, and it's an amazing exhibit. And we don't honor these folks enough. So if you haven't, Google them, check it out. But the museum is awesome in Arlington. As I said, there's another one in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, that's equally great. It's just not as big.
Yeah, the pictures of the new one are fantastic and great fitting tribute. Dan, anything you want to say?
I want to leave it on what Sean just said because it's a great message.
Sean, thank you for that. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you tonight on Two Way Tonight. Take care.
Take care.